Thank you, Savannah. We're turning now to the news on Capitol Hill, and we're joined right here by Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, a Democrat from New York. He's participating in today's festival to bring attention to a bipartisan prison reform bill that he's introduced. You also look like you're in concert casual.
Concert casual, this is how we do in BK.
BK, let's start with the big news and then get into everything else. The whole nation was watching these hearings this week. Where do we go from here?
Well, hopefully, you'll see a thorough FBI investigation over the next week or beyond, if necessary. And then the facts will be brought to the forefront. We can all hope. And then the senators will take their constitutional responsibility of providing consent that is informed, that's principled, that's not based on partisanship. And then we'll see what decision is made.
And tell us about the prison reform legislation you have and how you see that figuring into all the people gathered here.
Well, we have a mass incarceration epidemic in America. When the war on drugs first started in 1971, there were less than 350,000 people incarcerated in America. Today, 2.2 million, disproportionately Black and Latino, more than any other nation in the world. And so, at least in the House with the First Step Act, we concluded that overcriminalization is not a Democratic problem or a Republican problem. It's an American problem, and we should work together. And we can start by helping currently incarcerated individuals be provided with the resources and tools to successfully transform themselves into society.
You know, Congressman, we know that there are, bills around the country. People are trying to get people who are formerly incarcerated their right to vote back. There's a lot of activity around that in prison reform. But how do we actually get to a bill that can be voted through, that Republicans will sign on to, such that it can actually become law?
Well, the interesting thing in the House, we had strong bipartisan support, at least for taking that first step related to prison reform and dealing with currently incarcerated individuals and facilitating their successful rehabilitation and reentry into society. Now, we have to break apart the prison industrial complex, which is broader and targets low-income communities of color with things like mandatory minimums, the failed war on drugs, the tough on crime policies, which Jeff Sessions has been an obstacle toward achieving.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the Senate there's been a similar track for this bipartisan legislation, and you have this sort of strange situation, the DOJ lobbying against those bills. Chuck Grassley actually got quite angry at Jeff Sessions about that. Do you think that there's enough sort of weight on both sides to sort of overcome the obstacle the DOJ is currently presenting?
Well, I think because Jeff Sessions' credibility continues to erode, it's non-existent on the Democratic side, and it's falling apart on the Republican side, particularly as it relates to Chuck Grassley, that I expect that after the midterm elections, his voice and his ability to continue to try to block criminal justice reform will be minimized even further.
Well, it's sure going to be minimized if he's out of a job.
Right, and that's a whole other situation that we have to deal with as it relates to the constitutional crisis connected to the Mueller investigation.
Right.
But we'll stay in the prison reform lane.
I got to ask you one other question just about this. So the private prison industry is not only a behemoth, but it's also a huge funder of one of the two political parties. And so they have a voice in all of this. And with immigration also involving what now is going to be mass incarceration, including of minors, how do you bring a bill together that also addresses that problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. And certainly the notion of private prisons and the abuses and the overreach that we've seen in the immigration context troubles all of us in Congress. I think we've decided that we have to approach criminal justice reform on one track and immigration reform on the other. But in the context of criminal justice reform related to incarcerating individuals here in this country who are American citizens, that we should not be subsidizing private companies either.
All right, you're slightly older than me. We're a similar cohort. Who are you most excited to see here today?
I'd say maybe Cardi B.
Oh, wow,
there
okay.
You go.
Nice. That's a guy. That's an answer of someone who might run for mayor someday.
I was just going to say, you got all your constituent base.
Shout out to the BX from Brooklyn's own Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Ari.